Okay, let's create the backup job. So backup, let's say, so we're not doing anything from a virtualization point of view. We're backing up some physical Windows machines, or one in this case. We're going to choose server. We'll look at the other options a little bit later. We're going to choose the manage by backup server mode. So this is where the VBR server will manage the agent and the backup schedule. In some environments where maybe there's poor connectivity to remote sites, you may choose the manage by agent option. So that means the agent on the server manages the backup policy itself. So it could be quite handy in some circumstances, but for most organizations that I've come across using agent-based backups, this is the option that they've gone with. Let's call it Melbourne. Actually, I'll call it Melbourne agent-based. Just Melbourne agent backups. We don't need high priority. Protected computers. So we can obviously nominate specific machines, but we do have a protection group now. Melbourne physical servers. Okay. Pretty self-explanatory. On the backup mode, we're going to choose entire computer, so that pretty much means it's going to get every bit of our physical machine. We could just be a bit more selective and go with volume level backup if that is of any benefit. So maybe a D drive or an E drive. We could select on a particular machine, or we can go a little bit deeper and do a file level backup. So maybe potentially folders or files on a particular server that we're only interested in backing up. In this case, I'm just going to go with entire computer. And for storage, so we've only got one repository. So we're going to go with this 1 terabyte size Veeam repository. For retention, I'm going to go with 14 days. That's what the business has requested. Probably most businesses would need a little bit more retention than 14 days, but just for the purpose of this lab, we're going to go with 14 days. We're not going to use any GFS at this point, but we will bring that in a little bit later on when we do some other type of backups as well, especially when we're trying to offload to public cloud. But for now, we'll just keep it at 14 days. Let's go and have a look at the advanced options. So just really quick and high level, we have the options to doing a synthetic full backup or an active full backup or none at all. Without any ticks on these options, apologies for the screen break. I was just trying to bring the window behind where we've selected 14 days worth of backups, but so without those two options ticked, we're doing a forever forward incremental backup. So essentially that looks like a full backup followed by 13 incremental backups, and for any subsequent backups after that, they're created as incrementals, and essentially the first incremental after the first full backup gets rolled into the full backup file. So that full backup file pretty much never changes. It's always the same full backup that's just ingesting daily incrementals forever, basically. Let me just cancel that. The window looks bad. A synthetic full basically means that with this setting on a Saturday, we create a brand new full backup of this backup job. A synthetic full is a great utility in the sense that we don't go to the source. So back to in this case, back to LDC1 and do a full backup of that server. A synthetic full will look into the repository and see what backups exist, and essentially will synthesize a full backup based on those backup files. And the other bonus to a synthetic full is that if you are using the REFS file system or XFS file system in Linux, we don't duplicate additional blocks. So potentially having two full backups of the same server would only really be storing it once, despite having two full backups, if that makes sense. The only things that we see physically on the disk are any changes. Basically, any changes get stored as physical consumed disk. With an active full, though, it's pretty much the same, except we go to the source. So we go back to MLDC1 and do a full backup of that server, and we don't get that storage savings through REFS. It's another brand new full backup. So for the purpose of this this job, we're just going to stick with a synthetic full. It's going to be created every Saturday. I don't really change anything else here for now. We'll go into details in other jobs about some of these options, but essentially what's out of the box is okay. The only thing you may want to look at is encryption. It's very topical these days. Encryption, they're saying pretty much encrypt all your backups where possible. So, but I won't do that just for the time being. I'm going to leave that for another video, just specific to encryption. So let's leave it at that. Move across to guest processing, just another important setting. We will enable application aware processing, basically because this server that we're backing up is a domain controller. We should select this option for any servers that are a domain controller, an Exchange server, a SQL server, a SharePoint server, or an Oracle server. That way we'll get application consistent backups. And we can also, for things like Exchange and SQL, we can do transaction log processing as well, depending on what settings. And again, we'll look at a bit more deeper level of this when we start to back up SQL or Exchange later on. Leave this option unchecked. It provides the capabilities of doing one-click restores. It's more pertinent to using the self-service restore portal, which we don't have set up at this stage. So I generally leave this unchecked. Ticking this box doesn't really yield any additional options to a backup administrator. We can still restore in the same way with this option ticked or not. It doesn't make anything quicker or slower. Yeah, it's really, I've only really seen this of a benefit for the self-service restore portal, which we're not using at this stage, so I'll leave that unchecked. And then it's just the self-explanatory schedule. Let's do 10 p.m. every day, and done. Finish. So here we have our first backup job scheduled for tonight at 10 p.m. What I might do is maybe kick it off now anyways. We do have the option to, a couple of different options here. This is the first time it's going to be a backup, so it will automatically be an active full backup, but we do have the ability to do a manual active full backup if required. So we'll just start the backup off, and what I like to do, again, I find that these little windows are quite informative. So it's checking that protection group list to see what virtual machines or physical machines or agent-based machines are going to be available, and picks up MLDC1. So if we click away, we see pretty much the job actions, what's happening within the actual job itself. It says here processing MLDC1. So we won't see much else happening here, but if we click on MLDC1, see what the backup job is doing specifically to this machine. So we've got initializing and preparing backup. Just monitor for a little bit longer. Creating VSS snapshot. Suspect that's relating to the application aware component of this backup. I might create another job later without the application aware, and I wonder if we see this option. I suspect not. Getting a list of local users. And now we're reading the disk, so it's going to read that first disk. And that's still on the C drive first. See the D drive pop up pretty shortly. Now this D drive is, I think it's 60 gig, but sorry, 40 gig, but it's only used a little over 20. So I suspect, well, 100% certain, it's not going to take up 60 gig of repository space. It's only, so any white space it's going to ignore. That looks pretty good for now. So I might just pause the video and wait for it to finish. It'll probably take about 10 minutes or so, and we'll come back. And now we're done. So that actually took a little longer than 10 minutes. So it took about, let's have a look at the job there. Started at 3:01, finished at 3:31. So 30 minutes to complete. So you can see here, actually, also there's the duration there, 30 minutes, 52 seconds. Gave us a bit of a processing rate. 207 gig was processed all up and transferred 163. So I think with a bit of compression and dedupe, we got 1.2 times so compression dedupe ratio. So a little bit of storage savings as a result of this backup job. So Veeam's got some really good capabilities there. We'll probably see this grow even more in when we've added additional virtual machines or physical service to this backup job. The other thing just to quickly look at is the actual repository itself. So this is the backups folder. So this is where all our backup jobs will live. Veeam Agent backups, and then followed by the server. So we've got ldc1.jt lines. So here's the VBK file, and that is of the size, so about 172 gig in size. And this here, the VBM file, is just the metadata file, so it's controlling or looking after all the information with regards to the backup chain. So we don't have a backup chain as such, we've just got the single backup file. So let's quickly create a backup chain. So let's do an incremental backup. So if we come back here and we go start again, wait for that to fire up. So an incremental backup, basically just looking for changes since the previous backup. And using the change block tracking mechanism, it can effectively do that search nice and quickly. And hopefully we will see this backup job complete a lot quicker than 30 minutes than the original full backup job. So let's have a look at this process. basically doing most of the same tasks as the original backup. Getting a list of local users again. There we go. Let's see how quickly it does the C drive. And see here, CBT, change block tracking. So it's using that mechanism to read the drive and back up any changes. And it's already complete. And the D drive is also complete. I mean, essentially there would have been very, very minimal change in the couple of minutes between doing the full backup and this incremental backup. But looks like finalizing, adding transaction logs, which there wouldn't be any of, and collecting recovery media files. This is going to complete very shortly, at 3 minutes. And you can see it's processed the same amount of data, so 208 gig. But through the change block tracking mechanism, it would have skimmed over the majority of that. It would only have been looking for anything that has changed, and that would be the data that it would have read, and then made a transfer. So it still sees it's still transferred about a gig of data in that change. I suspect that might be just a number of small little minor changes in Active Directory um, that are probably occurring on a regular basis. So it's all about blocks as well. So even if particular components of data within a block hasn't changed, but a little bit of a block has changed, it's got to re-back up that whole block again. So I suspect that's why we get around a gig of change there. It's probably not a true reflection of what's really changed. But that's it. It's complete 4.5 minutes for the incremental backup. So that's pretty good. And what we'll see now, we go back to our repository again. And now we see this VIB file, Veeam incremental, about 1 gig in size. And I guess that's all really important. We won't do a restore at the moment, but if we needed to, there's a few different ways to do this. I normally just come to my backups section, so I know what type of backups do I have. Well, I have a disk backup here. I look into this particular job. I've got this virtual machine. It's telling me you've got 2 restore points, so I had that full backup and the incremental. And for instance, if we wanted to, there's a whole heap of things we could potentially restore and where we could restore it to. Let's say, for instance, I just wanted to grab something off the D drive. Very similar to any other backup product here. So if you haven't used Veeam before, but we can just go to the most recent backup, and this is where some people might get a bit confused with the way this operates. So Veeam installs with a bunch of what they call Veeam Explorers. So all this is doing is, this box here is, we're selecting what we want to potentially restore. We're not actually restoring anything. We're just saying, look at this particular restore point, and then we've got this option to browse, and basically it's just going to mount this backup, mount this restore point for us to view in a Explorer. So this new window here is called a Veeam Explorer. There's a few different types as well, depending on what it is that you're backing up. There's an Exchange Explorer, a SQL Explorer, and so forth. So this is just probably just a basic browser explorer. But anyways, here's our C and D drive, and we can go into our admin shares here. We can do any type of restores if we needed to. Restore a folder, store it to original locations, copy it to somewhere else, or we can open up an Explorer and it looks a little bit like a Windows Explorer, and we can just move store data to wherever we prefer. And obviously there we've got files as well that we can play around with. It's pretty straightforward. I won't do an actual restore, there's no need at the minute, but just wanted to show you what that kind of looks like. And what you see there is, I know that this is just a agent-based backup, but the restore procedures are pretty much similar for all types of backups that we do, whether it's agent-based or VM-based or whatever, or what have you. So that's a little bit of an insight, but we'll get into a bit more detail with all our backups and recoveries in the coming videos. But yeah, for now, that's our agent-based backup complete.